Greg, thank you so much and welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Of course. Well, I'm just going to kick things off with a very simple but basic, important question. And that is, what is free speech?
Mm-hmm. And in its most, in simplest sense, it's just the ability to say what you want and say what you will. Freedom of speech, is the big Boolean circle around things like the First Amendment. I think we're very lucky to live in a country where Americans routinely confuse the First Amendment and freedom of speech. But as I often point out, freedom of speech is the much bigger, bolder, older concept that led to the First Amendment, which is one of its best representations in law. But it's a much bigger idea than even the First Amendment can contain.
I imagine there are a lot of misconceptions out there. What are some of the big ones? Like, what is it that I'm missing when it comes to free speech?
I did I'm on episode 18 of a series that I'm doing with Nadine Strawson, the former president of the ACLU and a good friend who I've worked with for a long time, trying to clear up misconceptions about freedom of speech. I probably could do another 20 easily. There are so many misconceptions. But I do think that one of the best ones is embodied in this sort of crusade against misinformation. And yes, I get it that you should be concerned if people are willfully lying to people about things that could be medically damaging to them. But it sometimes gets talked about as if it's sort of like a no-brainer. Oh yeah, we should absolutely be regulating disinformation. Like, they don't seem to get that the truth is actually very hard to know. And this is something that my friend Jonathan Rauch, he's a great champion of freedom of speech. And he wrote a book called Constitution of Knowledge and another book called Kindly Inquisitors. And the whole point is that our intuitions tend to be wrong. Our guesses tend to be wrong, but we still hold them as if they're absolutely true. So the whole process of finding out distinguishing truth from falsity, it's arduous, it's lifelong, it's not nearly as easy as it sounds. And the idea that we can just put, for example, the government in charge of banning what it sees as misinformation. I mean, first of all, that's a blank check. They could silence almost anybody, but it also just plays havoc with the fact that what we think is true changes almost, certainly from year to year, but almost day to day.
Yeah. And we'll get into more of that because I think that comes down to the importance of critical thinking as well.
Oh, yeah.
I guess another kind of follow on, though, to misconceptions of free speech is, when does it apply? Does it apply in the private sector, or is it only like from the government? Like, I guess it's like, are you protected from like retaliation of the government or from your employer, or I guess, on college campuses? Like, when are you protected?
Well, the First Amendment only binds government. It only tells the government what it can and can't do. Freedom of speech, though, as I said before, is an older idea, and it's not limited by law. That's one of those things that when we made the expansion from being the Foundation for Individual Rights in Education, and we announced about a month ago that we are expanding to be the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, which will expand beyond campus. Why we talked a lot about free speech culture. Because no, it isn't against the law to fire one of your employees because you don't like what they said on Twitter. You have the perfect rights to do that. At the same time, I get worried that if we live in a society where people feel like they can't be employed and not give their authentic opinions on things, I don't think that's long-term good for society. However, I don't want it to be the government deciding that now we're actually extending these free speech protections to all corporations in the country, because that limits the associational rights of private actors. So what we're arguing is essentially that we need to put a thumb back on the scale for knowing what people really think, taking seriously the possibility you might be wrong, and always saying to ourselves, you know what, it's actually probably better that I know what this person thought. And it's probably better to have this, a person with a different point of view on my team, because I think we've gone way too far in the direction of people getting, to use a controversial term, canceled for, in some cases, everything from retweeting a joke to just saying what they actually believe.
You mentioned something that just kind of piqued my interest, and you said free speech culture. What is that?
Free speech culture, I think, is, I think the first part of it is taking seriously the possibility you might be wrong, knowing that you're not all knowing, and hearing people out. It's very, I think it's free speech culture is best represented by idioms we used to have as a society, sayings. When we were younger, I'm sure it was the same for you, although I'm decidedly older than you, that, that there was sayings that people would say all the time, including "it's a free country," "to each their own," "not my cup of tea," "everyone's entitled to their opinion." All of these things that undergird the habits of living in a free society. So I think that I think all of these older idioms, which you don't really use anymore, are reflective of a healthy attitude about discourse, about the give and take in daily life in a democracy.